At Sesame Street, I always felt that we should our boss was not me, it wasn't the chairman of our board. It was really about a 4-year-old girl in East Baltimore. And if she wasn't into what we were doing on Sesame Street, trying to drive home lessons around letters and numbers or social and emotional learning, we weren't meeting our mission. And she was going to use the power of the remote control to make sure she voted somewhere else. And it was up to us to build compelling programming that was going to reach her and teach her. And it was that person who I always wanted our folks to be thinking about. And as we go through the next 2 or 3 days down here in Miami, I urge you to think about that 4-year-old girl in East Baltimore or that 12-year-old in Knoxville who might be struggling, might not be struggling, the first time ever person who's going to college who is an immigrant, but also folks who are trying to work through the process of making the American dream happen. Those of you in this room all know what I'm talking about. Education is at a crossroads in this country right now, and someone who's sort of on the outside a little bit looking in, using the power of media and storytelling to make a difference for a long time. I'm not in the classroom every day like many of you are, but I see all of these policies at a bit of a turning point right now. And a lot of good ideas have turned out to be good ideas, and some have turned out to be not so great ideas when they're actually operationalized. And No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and Common Core and charters and Teach for America and assessments and textbooks and all these things are under attack for various reasons. Some of them are good reasons, some of them are bad reasons. But we're at a point now when we really have to be thinking about our children and what kind of a world are we leaving them. So what I wanted to walk you through today a little bit is this simple topic called the world, which Anna teed up as education on a global stage. I'm pleased to kick off the conference because this is really about kids, and it's really about giving them an economic, giving them an environmental, a social, and a political stability wherever they are in the world, but mostly here in America, in this room, that they are inheriting from us. What are the tools that we can teach them how the world works? And that's what we are promoting really at National Geographic, and that's what, in fact, the founders of National Geographic did back in 1888 when a bunch of folks got together in Washington, D.C., and they wanted to have a popular journal to tell people about the amazing discoveries. So they put in stories like the geological strata of the Potomac River, a real page-turner, right? And it was up to then Alexander Graham Bell, who came up with this radical idea at the time. He was the disruptor of the era. Let's put photographs in the magazine. And actually, there were members of the Board of Trustees who quit in protest because they thought the magazine was being dumbed down. They were wrong. He was right. And he was the disruptor of the era, like Steve Jobs was the disruptor in many of our lives, as I'm reminded every 3 seconds as this goes off. So, pictures were put out there, and it was really about storytelling. The best teachers that I had, the best teachers I think each of us had, were those who were great storytellers. It doesn't mean they have to be entertainers, but they need to be able to put history in a context. They need to make science experiential. And those are the kinds of things that we are trying to do at National Geographic and why it translates so well around the world. Because we are facing great global challenges. This is a picture from Hurricane Sandy a couple years ago, not very long, up the coast 1,000 miles or so. And it reminded us how ill-prepared we are for these sorts of disasters and how quickly things can deteriorate and turn into a bad place. Education is the fundamental foundation of what we do to prepare for these kinds of events. How are we going to feed 9 billion people by the year 2050? And the consequences of prosperity for millions of immigrants who have come to our country, or the 300 million Chinese who have been brought out of poverty in the last 30 years. A staggering number when you think about it. But of course, the consequences of prosperity have costs. They have environmental costs. And any one of you who have been to Beijing or Shanghai in the last year will know exactly what I'm talking about, is you literally find it hard to breathe walking out of your hotel. So this is a time when we as educators need to step up. Are we getting the job done? This photo of a train station in Mumbai reminded me and my colleagues kind of some of the statistics about education, that American companies are losing an estimated $2 billion due to inadequate cross-cultural guidance for their employees in dealing with multicultural type situations, that American children between 3 and 12 spend only 1% of their time outdoors. 45 million Americans think the ocean is a source of fresh water, which it is with a desalination plant. 130 million believe that hydropower is America's top energy source. Not even close. Oil, coal, nuclear, gas, natural gas are all way ahead of hydropower. And fewer than 10% of American adults say they are fluent in at least one other language, compared to 50% of folks in Europe. Some of that's for obvious reasons, but as we compete on a global scale for our kids, and we want to give them the kind of foundation it takes, we've got to focus on these issues holistically and together. Geography seems to be losing its place in the classroom at a time when we probably want it to grow in the classroom. It was identified as one of 9 core subjects by the federal government, but it's consistently given no funding. But we do have opportunities because American business is so interdependent around the world as we see imported products and exported products in all of our households and when we travel around the world. We, as grant makers in this room, need to think about that global interconnection. One of the great leaders of National Geographic, Gil Grosvenor, who I have the privilege of succeeding, would talk about what was in a pencil, where the wood came from, and the lead came from, and the rubber came from. It's a geographic lesson, or a plate of food that you're going to have at lunch today. Those are the lessons we can tell kids and teach kids, and it's interesting because they have no idea. And you get out that globe on your table and you can point to where rubber came from, and that's a way of really experientially teaching kids what it's about. I leave you with a couple of thoughts. This interconnected world is the one we all own, and those of you who are investing in new innovators, please continue to do that. I also urge you to continue to invest in those people who have been proven to connect with kids. And I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about there's lots of other things that actually have worked, but they still need your support because the marketplace doesn't necessarily fill that gap, nor does the government. So it's very important that this group are the risk takers, yes, but also the ones who continue to supply and support the food necessary to nourish those who are changing the course. Let's think about this road and how the human migration story can be the story of a young child born in Little Havana today, and that child all the way to become an older person with a cane. That's what I'd like you to think about over the next 3 days. and I so thank you for inviting me to join you. Have a great conference.